Hi, this is WillAG, or at least the text being spoken by Google's text-to-speech is from WillAG. I usually post webcomics, which are sometimes random funny comics, but I also have a main series called Strange Tales from the Hood. I decided to do this to track my own progress with learning motion graphics and animation, and with testing different programs. I also just wanted to try out something different from what I usually do, and hopefully, I can maybe even attract more attention to my comics, which I'll leave a link to in the description. With that being said, making I Can't Snooze Without You took much longer than expected, especially since I was learning as I was creating it. Despite it only being 60 seconds and having pretty simplistic graphics, it took many hours to make, and some of the assets were things I had already drawn. I trimmed down this section a lot, since it's just debris in a spiral and nothing particularly aesthetic. I had already drawn part of the spiral using the noise control and dusty brushes, but then I added in more debris that will be moving. For context, this debris is part of the power system in Strange Tales from the Hood, and the deuteragonist and the main threats emerged from a spiraling portal. I decided to try Adobe Fresco's animation capabilities, since I usually use the app for drawing my comics, since I already use my Adobe subscription for other work. Using Fresco allowed me to still use my drawing tools to draw different frames and layers. Previously, I've only used simple apps like Motion Leap or basic keyframing in Premiere Pro. Being able to duplicate frames and transform them helped speed up the process and keep the debris consistent. This was still a pretty tedious process though, and I had to go back a few times to add more frames. When editing in Premiere Pro later, I still had to duplicate some frames. It really put into perspective for me how many frames it takes to make animation look smooth. An issue I encountered was when I was exporting the sequence to add to the overall video. At first, I exported the sequence as an MP4, but the background was white. The only way I could keep the background transparent was to export the animation as individual frames, then adjust in Premiere Pro. I have less experience with After Effects, so I watched a YouTube tutorial for advice on making glitch effects. I chose to start by using the displacement map effect on the text to make it physically glitchy as a transition. I've never used this effect before, so I had to watch certain parts of the tutorial a few times and carefully make adjustments. Like many effects, it has several settings that you can adjust to shift the effect a lot. I particularly liked this one because I could use it to transition between texts. The effect also worked well when adding the different colors to the glitch. I basically had to make copies of the text transition, change the text colors, then adjust their positions. The fractal noise effect allowed me to add more of a glitchy pixel-like visuals to the graphic. I also liked playing with the fractal noise effect because it gave me the idea to also export it as its own transition that I can overlay on other clips. This section ended up still being long because I had to adjust the different elements and settings a lot to get them just right. I once again ran into the problem of having a background, but I figured out that I needed to export it as an AVI file instead of an MP4 and set channels to RBG plus alpha. There's some points in the editing process, like this one, when I was just playing around with some settings and variations. This was one of the rare times when I actually learned something from a video instead of strictly winging it, but I still played with the settings so I could have some options. In this last section, it shows when I went back to the files with my comic chapters to export some additional assets for the video. This actually happened much later in the process, but I decided it would make more sense with this part of the video. Since this video is already a bit lengthy, even with all the cuts and parts one sped up, I'll be sharing the part of the process when I put everything together in Premiere Pro in a second video. Hopefully, this video was interesting, and if it was, please watch part 2 when I post it. Also, check out some of my other work, such as the comics I mentioned. Thank you for watching.